Picture this. You are standing in a driveway. The house behind you was nice. Not mansion nice, just normal nice. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garage, a backyard where you could grill on a Sunday without your neighbor 6 feet away watching you flip a burger. The listing price is $499,900, and you cannot afford it. Not because you're broke, not because you blew your savings on crypto or a boat or a bad business idea. You cannot afford it because you are a college-educated professional in your early 30s making $80,000 a year, which used to sound like real money, which in 2026 barely gets you through the front door of a mortgage application. You scroll through the listing anyway. You always scroll through the listing. This is the story of the $500,000 house. Who can buy it, who thinks they can buy it, and what that gap says about the world we are actually living in right now. Start with one number. The median home price in the United States in early 2026 is hovering just above $420,000. That means half of all homes sold are above that, half are below. And a $500,000 house, which sounds expensive, which is expensive by any historical standard, is barely above average. Let that sit for a second. $500,000, barely above average. 10 years ago, $500,000 bought something genuinely impressive in most American cities. Today, it buys you a 3-bedroom colonial 45 minutes from downtown, with a kitchen last updated in 2009 and a furnace that works fine, just makes a noise sometimes. The question is not whether $500,000 is a lot of money. It is. The question is who, in 2026, can actually write that check, or sign that mortgage, or walk into that closing without feeling like they're about to make the worst financial decision of their life. The answer is more complicated than you think, and more unsettling. Meet Alex. Alex is 34, works in corporate finance in Charlotte, North Carolina, makes $105,000 a year, top 30% of American earners. He saved, he was disciplined. He has $85,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account earmarked specifically for a house. Credit score of 748, no car payment, student loans almost gone. By every traditional measure, Alex is exactly who the housing market was built for. When he sat down with a mortgage lender 8 months ago, he found out what built for actually means in 2026. His lender approved him for up to $380,000. Combined with his down payment, that's roughly $460,000 in purchasing power. Close to $500,000, not quite there. And not quite there in this market means not competitive, because the homes listing at $490,000 in the neighborhoods Alex wants are selling for $515,000, sometimes $530,000. Alex is doing everything right, and he is still on the outside looking in. So who is getting these houses? To answer that, we need to do the math. And I promise this will not feel like a math class. It will feel more like someone slowly explaining why your shoes are tied together right before a race. In 2021, mortgage rates were around 3%. A $400,000 loan at 3% over 30 years gives you a monthly payment of roughly $1,686. Add taxes and insurance, you're looking at maybe $2,200 a month total. In 2026, rates are sitting between 6.8 and 7.2%. Same $400,000 loan at 7%, monthly payment jumps to $2,661. With taxes and insurance, you're now at $3,300 to $3,600 a month. That's a $1,400 difference every month for 30 years. Now apply that to a $500,000 house. Put 10% down, $50,000, you're borrowing $450,000. At 7%, your principal and interest payment is $2,994. Add property taxes, roughly $500 a month, Homeowners insurance, $175. PMI, private mortgage insurance, which you pay when your down payment is under 20%, another $200 a month. Total monthly housing payment, roughly $3,869. Call it $3,900. Standard lending guidelines say your total debt obligations should not exceed 43% of your gross monthly income. If your housing payment is $3,900, you need to earn at least $9,069 a month gross to qualify. That's $108,800 a year, before taxes, with zero other debt. The average American household income in 2026 is around $80,000. You see the gap. And that gap, that specific mathematical gap between what households earn and what it costs to carry this mortgage, is the engine behind everything strange happening in the housing market right now. Because here's the part nobody talks about enough. These homes are still selling. They're not sitting on the market for 6 months. They're not getting slashed in price. They're moving, which means somebody is buying them. So let's talk about who. The first group, dual income households with no kids yet. 2 people, both working, combined income of $140,000 or more. Economists call them DINK households, dual income, no kids. And right now, DINKs are one of the primary engines of the $400,000 to $600,000 market. This is not new, but it has become more extreme because the housing math now essentially prices out single-income households in most major markets, which means the implicit requirement for homeownership in 2026 is increasingly a partner with a stable income, not a bonus, a structural requirement. Think about what that means culturally. Alex makes $105,000 a year and cannot comfortably buy a $500,000 house alone. A couple where each partner earns $72,000, less than Alex individually, can probably pull it off together. The math rewards partnership, which sounds almost romantic until you realize it has nothing to do with love and everything to do with debt-to-income ratios. The second group, existing homeowners rolling equity. This is the most powerful force in the current market and the least visible if you're on the outside. Someone bought a house in 2018 for $280,000. By 2026, it's worth $470,000. Their remaining loan balance is $220,000. They're sitting on roughly $250,000 in equity. They sell, walk away with around $220,000 after fees, roll it straight into a $500,000 house as a down payment. Now they're borrowing only $280,000. Their monthly payment drops dramatically. The whole math changes. These buyers aren't fighting the interest rate environment the same way first-time buyers are. They're bringing massive ammunition to the same market, competing for the same houses against people like Alex who are starting from scratch. This is the central, largely unspoken irony of the 2026 housing market. The very price increases that made homeownership inaccessible for first-time buyers simultaneously created a class of existing homeowners more empowered to buy than ever before. The already housed get richer, the unhoused get more priced out. The third group, high earners in specific industries, tech, finance, law, medicine, consulting. Senior software engineers pulling $160,000 to $200,000 in total comp. Second-year law associates at $215,000. Hospitalist physicians at $280,000. These are not hedge fund managers. These are people with normal jobs that happen to pay exceptionally well. For them, $500,000 is not comfortable, but it is manageable, especially with a high-earning partner or aggressive savings or both. This is the group held up as proof the market is fine, that hard work still pays off, that people are still buying homes. And technically, yes, but it's a narrowing slice of the population being used to represent a widening reality. The fourth group, and this one makes people uncomfortable, investors. Not the massive Wall Street funds buying entire subdivisions, though that does happen. The more common version is smaller, Individual investors, people who own 2 or 3 rental properties and are buying another. For them, the math is different. They're not asking whether they can afford the monthly payment on their income. They're asking whether the rental income covers the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance and still leaves something. That math is harder in 2026 than it was 3 years ago. But cash buyers and investors with substantial equity from existing properties can still make it work in ways that regular owner-occupants simply cannot. Now the elephant in the room, or more specifically, the elephant on the family group chat: parental help. According to research from the National Association of Realtors, roughly 27% of first-time homebuyers received financial assistance from family as part of their down payment. In higher-cost markets, that number is substantially higher. We're talking about parents who bought in 1995 for bought a $120,000 home, watched it appreciate to $500,000 and more, and are now writing checks to their children to help them enter the same market they walked into with a fraction of the barrier. It is wealth recycling, or if you want to be more direct about it, one generation's timing becoming another generation's lifeline. Alex does not have that. His parents rent. They always have. They cannot write a $70,000 check. So Alex is competing against peers with similar salaries and an additional $50,000 to $100,000 of family capital working quietly in the background. He does not resent those people. He just notices the starting line is not in the same place. Now let's talk about how we actually got here, because this did not happen overnight. Following the 2008 financial crisis, the American home building industry essentially collapsed. Between 2010 and 2020, the United States built roughly 1.5 million fewer homes than household formation rates required. A structural supply deficit, a hole that was never filled. Meanwhile, a decade of near-zero interest rates kept demand artificially elevated. When money is essentially free to borrow, people buy assets. Housing is an asset. Prices rose and rose and rose. Then rates went up sharply. Between 2022 and 2024, the Fed raised rates more aggressively than it had in decades. Mortgage rates roughly doubled in 18 months. Normally, that cools prices. More expensive mortgages mean fewer qualified buyers, which forces sellers to drop prices, basic supply and demand. But sellers did not sell. People who locked in at 3% in 2020 and 2021 had zero incentive to sell, move, and take on a new mortgage at 7%. That would mean voluntarily doubling their monthly payment. Almost nobody does that unless they absolutely have to. So inventory collapsed. The number of homes listed dropped dramatically, and with fewer homes on the market, even a smaller pool of qualified buyers was still competing against each other. Prices held. In many markets, prices kept climbing. This is called the lock-in effect, and it is why higher interest rates did not fix affordability. In a specific, counterintuitive way, they made it worse. The market became simultaneously unaffordable and illiquid, expensive to buy, rare to find. And here we are. Just wait for the crash. You have heard it. Maybe you have said it. It's the housing equivalent of things will get back to normal. Worth spending a moment on because it's shaping how millions of people are making decisions right now. The argument, prices are too high, affordability is broken. Eventually something gives, prices fall. Just wait. Not entirely wrong, markets do correct. But here's the problem. For prices to fall significantly, you need a massive increase in supply or a massive drop in demand, ideally both. On supply, builders are still not closing the structural gap from the last decade. Zoning laws make high-density construction slow and expensive in most American cities. Labor and materials costs remain elevated. Supply is improving, but slowly. On demand, the largest generation in American history is in its peak home buying years. The oldest millennials are 40, the youngest are 29. That demographic pressure is not going away. There is no shortage of people who want to buy, only of people who can afford to. And a crash requires motivated sellers. People sitting on homes they bought at 3% with 6 figures of equity are not motivated sellers. They can rent the property. They can wait for rates to drop. They can hold. Some markets will correct. Parts of the Sun Belt that saw pandemic-era price explosions have already cooled. But a national 2008-style collapse? The conditions are not obviously in place. Which means people waiting for the crash may be waiting for something that looks very different from what they imagine. And while they wait, they're renting. Alex made a decision. 8 months after that first lender meeting, he bought a $385,000 townhouse in a suburb he finds genuinely acceptable, if not exciting. Put 20% down to eliminate PMI. Monthly payment came out to around $2,400 all in. It fits. It's not his dream home, but it's his. He ran one specific calculation before pulling the trigger. Every month he waited, he paid $1,850 in rent that built zero equity. Meanwhile, home prices in his target area had appreciated roughly 4% over the past year. On a $500,000 home, 4% is $20,000 annually, about $1,667 a month in appreciation he was not capturing. His real choice was not buy now versus buy later in a cheaper market. His choice was buying something now versus hope for a correction while paying rent for an unknown number of years. He bought something. He compromised on the house. He did not compromise on the decision. Is that right for everyone? No. It depends on your city, your income stability, how long you plan to stay, and 100 variables that are different for every single person. But the framework matters. Because in a market this distorted, the buy or wait decision is no longer purely financial. It's a bet on your future income, on local market dynamics, on interest rate trajectories, on your own life over the next decade. Nobody has clean information on any of those things, including the people who sound the most confident about it. So, who can actually afford a $500,000 house in 2026? Dual-income households earning $140,000 or more combined, existing homeowners with serious equity to roll over, high earners in industries that outpaced inflation over the last decade, small investors with existing capital, and the occasional first-time buyer who got family help, saved aggressively, found a slightly more forgiving market, and got the timing right. That's not a small group. There are millions of people inside those categories, enough to keep the market moving, enough to keep prices from collapsing. But it's a narrowing group, and the people outside it are not there because they failed, not because they made bad choices, not because they spent their money wrong. They're outside it because the math moved, and nobody voted on whether the math should move. Here's the question worth sitting with. When a society's primary wealth-building mechanism becomes accessible mainly to people who already have an advantage, a high dual income, existing property, or family capital, what does that society become over the next 20 years? Not rhetorical, an actual question. Because the answer shapes what cities look like in 2040, what the middle class looks like, who gets to own things, and who spends their entire life paying someone else for the right to occupy space. The $500,000 house is just a house, but the story of who can buy it is the story of something much larger than real estate. And that story is still being written. If this made you see something differently, hit the like button. It helps this kind of analysis reach people who are asking the same questions and not finding honest answers. Subscribe if you want to keep going down this road. No hype here, no easy answers, just the numbers followed until they say something true. And drop a comment below. One specific question. What market are you in? And does $500,000 feel like a ceiling or a floor where you live? Because that answer changes everything. And I want to know exactly where you are standing when you read it.